Now's the time to finally realize we the people must make some choices. If we want single-payer health care, now's the time to raise our voices.
I'd like for us all to take a second to think about the land that you are inhabiting. You should always be cognizant that we are all on the ancestral, unceded, and occupied homelands of the indigenous peoples who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. We honor the enduring presence, cultures, and sovereignty of the native nations across what is now known as the United States. I hope you all will hold yourselves responsible in being in relationship with the land, the waters, and relatives, both living and passed on. So with that, we will be moving over to announcements. David, I believe you had some announcements you wanted to share.
First of all, I think most people know that Dr. John Guyman passed away. Was it last week or within the last couple of weeks anyway? And he was very important in our chapter. He was past president of PNHP National and honorary president of PNHP Washington chapter at our founding in 2006. And we had, before the pandemic, we had met in person and we gave out a John Guyman Health Justice Advocate Award. John was longtime chair of UW Family Practice, and he wrote prolifically. Almost every year he wrote a new book of it's very easy reading and important to keep in your library for reference because it dealt with what some current thing going on that subtracting from the health justice that he devoted his life to. There's much more, as I said, in our website and links about this legendary role model for all of us. People know of the National Single Payer Organization. Anna Malinoff is the president of that, but it's an organization that's devoted to national single payer, and they have produced a quote declaration of independence from the medical industrial complex that she's and her organization are asking all of us to sign on. So I'll write up when I send out the meeting. They hope to get hundreds of sign-ons that both individuals and organizations can sign on to, and they'll be using that in various ways. They're hoping to get several hundred anyway. This Friday, we'll be at a march to support Cuba in downtown Seattle around the FIFA events, and I hope it works out because there's parking problems and so on. But there's going to be thousands of people on the street, and our chapter, as I think most people know, has a very long history of supporting Cuba, and particularly U.S. medical students getting a free education at the Latin American School of Medicine in Havana. And most recently, Ariana Aquino, who just graduated from there, did one of our monthly meetings. We've got a huge No War on Cuba sign. Will dwarf any other signs out there, but we need 2 and probably 3 people to help carry it. It's not that heavy, but and it's one from the Backbone campaign with, on netting, so the wind doesn't make much difference there. But I think I put it on our website. Anyway, you can see, and I hope that there will be people down there to help us, some of you younger guys and gals. Anyway, I'm a member of the Seattle Cuba Friendship Committee. There's people there from that organization that'll be down there too. So we're also combining this with support for union workers at the Embassy Suites Hotel, and we're supporting union workers there who may be going on strike. But then we'll have that's going to be at 10 a.m. Little afternoon. We'll be doing a long walk down to the headquarters of the International Longshore and Workers Warehouse Union office south of there. Lastly, Pasara's Juneteenth celebration is on Saturday at New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, the Central District area, and it's going to feature artist and storyteller Delbert Richardson, who through displays, artifacts, and narrative teaches American history through an Afrocentric lens that truly allows us to understand the past and present. I'm hoping that other people will be there besides me. I'm pretty sure they're going to have a very large attendance there because Pasara has huge email list blast, and it's an amazing organization we collaborate with. Okay, that's it.
And then Calvin, Kshama, I believe you guys have your campaign has a number of events coming up as well. An event coming up on the 20th in Volunteer Park, along with other events.
Yeah, I could just say, so we're having what we call volunteer days. We're having our next volunteer day on Saturday. Yeah, we're having these, or have been having these every other week, and we're about to have them more frequently. This one is at 11 o'clock, and there are multiple meetup locations in the district, actually. So you can, because of course it's a large district, and so the three locations you can go to are Judkins Park Light Rail Station in Seattle, Fellow Light Rail Station in Seattle, or the Federal Way Farmers Market, which is down on the south end of the district. We also have a bigger event we're doing that's a little further off. We're doing a rally to elect Kshama Sawant to Congress. That's going to be on October 18th. And we're trying to build as big an event as possible for that. That's going to be in the Central District. And we have basically almost daily volunteer shifts. So if you go to our website, to the events page, you can see everything that is located there. At this point in the campaign, we are really ramping up our canvassing effort. And so there's ways to get active basically every single day.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and get right into it. I'd like to take a second to introduce Kshama Sawant, who is a revolutionary socialist and economist who served on the Seattle City Council from 2014 to 2024. Kshama led movements to win historic victories, including the highest minimum wage of any major city in the country, which is now at $21.30 an hour in Seattle. The Amazon tax that taxes businesses hundreds of millions of dollars per year to fund affordable housing, a slew of landmark renters' rights laws, the nation's strongest resolution against the genocide in Gaza, among many other accomplishments. As a city council member, she only took home an average worker's wage, donating the rest of her six-figure salary after taxes to labor union strike funds and other movements of working people. Now she's running for the U.S. Congress in Washington's 9th Congressional District, and if elected, she would be the first ever independently revolutionary socialist in Congress. Now, I wanted to add to that, we are PNHP Washington. We are part of Physicians for a National Health Program and a registered 501c3. So we have to add the caveat that we are hosting Kshama as a guest speaker and bringing in her experience and her thoughts on social justice issues. But being a 501c3, we cannot formally support any candidates during an election. But I wanted to bring Kshama and her people into this space for this a discussion really around organizing, and specifically organizing around healthcare workers, doctors, medical students, other health professionals. We have had some successes with our single payer movement. Going all the way back to the 80s, like the physicians' proposal that was founded by PNHP members or PNHP co-founders. They wrote the original single payer bill that is in Congress right now, and as well as in the Senate. But this was decades ago, and we've had, I would say, limited progress. We've had progress for sure, but I wanted to bring her into the space to not only speak to how we can think differently about organizing healthcare workers, organizing health professional students, but possibly also speak to some of her thoughts around health reform in the United States. So Kshama, please take it away, and we'll have space for discussion, Q&A afterwards. So we appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thanks so much, John, and thank you everyone here for inviting us, and thanks to all PNHP activists for the many decades of dedicated advocacy on the question of healthcare. As we all know and agree, the US healthcare system is an absolute horror show, and working people are fed up. 2 in 3 Americans want universal publicly provided healthcare with 90% support among Democratic Party voters. There's huge anger at the billionaire and millionaire, multimillionaire executives and shareholders of health insurance corporations and big pharma who are getting rich from denying coverage to people who desperately need it, and working people are ready to fight back. Our congressional campaign and also our organization, Workers Strike Back, which is not an electoral organization, it's a nonprofit organization like PNHP. We are of course demanding an end to all military aid to Israel and an end to weapons and all weapons and tech for genocide and imperialist war. All of this we see as connected to our question on healthcare, but also in addition to that, we are demanding free healthcare for all funded by taxing the rich. That means that every kind of healthcare, including dental, vision, abortion, and reproductive and gender affirming, disability, mental health, all of this care should be available for everyone, regardless of immigration or visa or citizenship status, free at the point of use, funded by taxing billionaires and multimillionaires. That's the idea that we are fighting for. This is the wealthiest nation in the history of humanity. So this absolutely is the bare minimum that we should have. But in our view, it is also strategically important that we have a demand that is formulated in this way, a system that eliminates the concept of paying health insurance premiums, a system that does not allow the wealthy to decide what health problem will be covered and what won't be covered for working people. We want the free healthcare system to start building its own clinics and hospitals. We want the free public system to mandate living wage, unionized jobs for all healthcare workers in the system, including doctors and nurses, obviously, but right down to the custodial workers. This is what we're fighting for. The cold hard truth is that it will require working people to go and carry out an all-out fight to win any of this. Absolutely, the role of physicians and more broadly all healthcare workers is pivotal. It is a central role that you all have to play in that you are the actual healthcare providers. The insurance companies are healthcare deniers. And the healthcare providers being at the forefront of the struggle is, I think, very, very crucial. And part of what we need, really the starting point of what we need to build this struggle is to understand who our enemies are. Obviously, the health insurance companies, pharmaceutical and medical device companies, for-profit hospitals, all of them. But these corporations are not inanimate objects. They are owned by billionaires and multimillionaires. And that not only means the executives who are directly implicated in the crisis and who directly either profit or don't profit, depending on what healthcare system there is. But it is not just them. It is also all the majority shareholders in all these corporations. And if you follow the money, it goes back to the same billionaires and multimillionaires. In other words, the point being that the entire billionaire and multimillionaire class will fight against us ruthlessly. And this is because the capitalist class is hostile to working people winning any victory, because it sends an emboldening message to us that we can actually fight and win. And what we end up actually winning will come down to the strength of our movement. It will come down to the balance of forces between us, working people who are fighting for healthcare, and them, the billionaires and multimillionaires who have a stake in keeping the status quo and making it worse. Capitalism is a zero-sum game. These health insurance profits, they come from denying people care and also on top of that, grossly underpaying workers in the healthcare sector. It is a life and death zero-sum game for many of us, and the billionaires don't care about us at all. And so winning healthcare will require militant working class movements, and it will require what we call a fighting strategy. A fighting strategy, first of all, means we have to understand who is on our side and who is not. In other words, we have to have a very sober assessment of who our allies are and who our enemies are. Obviously, the billionaires and multimillionaires, in other words, the capitalist class, they are not on our side. The Republican Party is nakedly hostile to working people's rights, including universal health care of any kind. And that's very clear. However, the truth is that the Democratic Party is not a lesser evil. The Democratic and Republican parties are the two most powerful parties of global capitalism, and they ruthlessly represent the interests of the billionaires. Both are up to their ears in health insurance and big pharma campaign donations, and any pretense they make to support universal public health care is a lie. For over 2 decades, the efforts to win universal health care have been dominated by labor and NGO leaders who have even well-meaning ones of them, cordially working with the Democratic Party in order to get a single payer, publicly funded and administered with no for-profit insurance type of bill, Medicare for all bill, either in Congress or in various states. Unfortunately, as we know, those efforts have not succeeded. Just to trace out the history of the Democratic Party, the Democrat Bill Clinton, who was president, failed to campaign on any clear promise of universal health care in his 1992 presidential campaign, but he did pledge mandating all companies to provide health insurance, publicly funded health care for the unemployed, rigorous cost controls on prescription drugs and medical procedures, and guaranteed access to health care. He and Hillary Clinton, who was the chair of his so-called task force on health care, failed to deliver any of these improvements in healthcare access. Worse, Bill Clinton and the Democratic and Republican parties, they carried out the first egregious bipartisan attack on Medicare and Medicaid. That was not Trump, it was Clinton and the Democrats in the Balanced Budget Act of 1997, which cut hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicare and Medicaid, and on top of that, opened the door to privatizing Medicare. So the Medicare Advantage, this is really a disadvantage for most ordinary people. That started there. And my main opponent, Adam Smith, also was one of the Democrats in the US Congress who voted for this bill. In his 2007 presidential campaign, Barack Obama promised universal health care, proclaiming that the nation, quote, can't afford another disappointing charade in 2008, 2009, and 2010, end quote. That was what he said. But as soon as he stepped into the White House in 2009, Obama promptly took single payer off the table, saying that he would push for a strong public option instead, which would allow at least the creation of public healthcare that would exist alongside for-profit insurance, offering working families a choice. Obama soon abandoned this promise also, and his Affordable Care Act was instead largely written by private health insurance industry and their interests. And in fact, there was also news reports of how their stock prices were rising once that deal was reached. In January 2021, Biden was in the White House. The Democrats had a majority in both House and Senate, and they refused to do anything. And to be clear, the Democrats had a majority in the House and Senate under Clinton also, under Obama also, and then under Biden. So there were many opportunities they had where they had all the votes that they could have had. They had they couldn't have blamed it on Republicans. They could have passed something, but they didn't. And then on top of all of that, less than a week after she launched her presidential campaign in 2024, Kamala Harris declared that she was not supporting universal health care. And so you can see that this has been, if you trace out the history clearly, it is a systematic barrier that the Democratic Party and the establishment has been to winning anything like single-payer healthcare. Now, as we know, some attempts have been made to win single-payer healthcare at the state level, but the Democratic Party has also maneuvered to kill those campaigns. The most obvious example, and I'm sure everybody here knows a lot of what I'm talking about, in the state of California, all the lies that the Democrats support single-payer healthcare have, in my view, have been completely exposed. I mean, the Democratic Party has had the California governor's mansion and a supermajority or near supermajority in both state houses, and has crushed efforts for the CalCare Universal Public Healthcare Program 4 times within the last 10 years, 4 times in 2017, 2022, 2024, and earlier this year. This is despite the fact that 86% of California's working people support single-payer healthcare. Each time, the nurses union leadership, the California Nurses Association, National Nurses United, that leadership of that union introduced the CalCare bill jointly with the state Democrats. Each time, the Democratic Party pulled the plug, and this is true for Governor Gavin Newsom as well. There are no Republicans to be blamed here. Obviously, the Republicans don't support us, but that is very obvious. This was a Democratic Party assault against CalCare from start to finish. Despite all the past defeats and the obvious lessons from them, we're seeing progressive Democrats like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, who obviously, they have said that they support Medicare for all. But it's a question of strategy. They're continuing to lead the universal public healthcare movement, in my view, down a road that is not going to give us any results. The failure of them to win any healthcare gains is no accident. It flows directly from their unfortunate strategy to their priority is not to antagonize the Democratic Party leadership. And then so you see Sanders unconditionally endorsed Hillary Clinton in 2016 after they destroyed his campaign. And then he unconditionally endorsed Joe Biden. And then he endorsed Joe Biden again within hours of Biden announcing his candidacy for re-election in a Democratic Party where they didn't even hold a primary. There was no pretense of a democratic process. And then Sanders unconditionally endorsed Kamala Harris. All of these presidential candidates refused to stand for any working class demands, let alone something big like universal public health care. AOC, unfortunately, has also done the same. When the Democratic Party had a majority in both the House and the Senate under Biden, the progressive Democrats refused to even push to make the Affordable Care Act, which is this meager program from Obama, make the subsidies permanent, knowing full well that if they didn't use that opportunity of the majority in Congress to make the subsidies permanent, and if Trump was to be reelected, that Trump and Republicans would go after that. And that's what they did. And now you have 24 million more people left in the lurch, many of them, especially young people, choosing to just not even get healthcare because the prices are so prohibitive. And obviously, all of that is now tacked on top of the skyrocketing rents and now the price of gas, which is really just completely crushing people's standards of living. And so, I mean, the point here is that the cornerstone of how progressive Democrats carry out this type of process is that they talk about universal healthcare and other progressive demands, but they don't ever take concrete steps that could actually help us win them. In 2021, like I said, they had a majority in the House and Senate, and Nancy Pelosi was up for a vote as the House Speaker. Myself and many figures on the left publicly called for AOC and her fellow squad members to use their numerical balance of power because she needed their votes because it's a narrow majority. The Republicans certainly weren't going to vote for a Democratic speaker, and so they had the leverage to use against her. I mean, this is an arch pro-capitalist politician. This is Nancy Pelosi, and they had the ability to force the vote on Medicare for all by withholding support from Pelosi for speakers, saying, we'll give you the votes only if you force the vote. But AOC publicly refused to do this, saying that, or claiming that it was not the right time, it was not a smart strategy, but that she was still committed to the issue. And now, many years later, AOC and the progressive Democrats have still failed to carry out any steps whatsoever to put concrete pressure on their party's establishment. And since then, what we have seen is that the MAGA Republicans, when Kevin McCarthy, the Republican speaker, was up for a vote, they did force the vote for their goals, which we don't share because this is the right wing, and the development of the right wing is an extremely dangerous phenomenon. But the point is that the MAGA Republican Congress members showed that they were willing to force the vote in order to gain their goals. And at that time, AOC was again asked, why didn't you do that? You said it could not be done, but they did it. And at that moment, AOC said, I think this was an honest statement on her part. She said that had I actually done that, that would have caused reputational and relational harm. I want to come back to this point later on in my introduction, because I think that's a pivotal question, is what it takes to go up against the Democratic establishment, and why it is that we are insisting on independent politics, is that this is what happens when what she meant by that was that had she done that, then she would have become enemy number one of the Democratic establishment, and they would have absolutely come after her. And that's not, I don't mean to say that as an excuse that excuses her. No, my point is that is why we are building independent politics, because if your strategy as a politician is to curry favor with the Democratic establishment and yet do good things for the working class, that is a circle that cannot be squared. It is you either get a nice career and keep the establishment happy, or you become enemy number one of the establishment, but you fight for working class people and you fight to do the things that you promised that you would do. That is the approach I have used on the city council in my decade on the Seattle City Council, and that's the approach we're using for our congressional campaign as well. Another indication of why this strategy is a dead end, sort of relying on the Democratic Party, is that progressive Democrats have formally brought forward congressional Medicare for all bills 13 times in the last 2 decades or so, but not once have these progressives built any mass movement around it, or even so much as brought it to a vote, including that time enforced the vote. It was not even in 2021 when Biden was president and the Democrats had majorities in both houses of Congress, and when more than half of the more than half of the House Democrats had formally sponsored the bill. See, this is the thing. On paper, more than half of the House Democrats formally sponsored Medicare for all at a moment when the Democrats had a majority in both houses of Congress. And yet that bill was not brought forward for a vote, because bringing forward bills that they have no intention of passing is all part of progressive political theater. It is used by progressive Democrats to perennially whitewash the anti-worker and warmongering character of their own party, and to keep working people perpetually straitjacketed inside the two parties of the billionaires, because you always think, well, this or that Democrat has sponsored the Medicare for all bill, so surely it's going to happen at some point, and then we're waiting in perpetuity. Another common ploy that the Democratic Party uses to block universal health care is to weaponize the question of who will pay for it. The question of how to fund single-payer health care was the stated reason used by the California Democratic Party when they crushed the bill in 2024. In Vermont, under pressure from a working class movement, Democratic politicians were forced to pass a statewide single-payer bill in 2011, But then in 2014, the state's Democratic governor, Peter Shumlin, backed by a Democratic majority in the state houses of representatives, Senate, again, majority in both houses of the state legislature, governors are Democrat. What do? They throw their hands up and say that, oh gosh, we don't know how to fund this bill, and they rescind the single payer law. It's already on the books. Rather than finding funding for it, they use the perennially false claim that the only way to fund single payer is by increasing taxes on working people and small businesses, and that can't be done. And we obviously agree that that should not be done, but we don't agree that that's the only way. And there was no mention of the actual thing that needs to be done, which is taxing the rich to pay for it. During the same time that progressives have thrown Medicare for all under the bus and the party leadership keeps demanding who's going to pay for it, what has happened at the same time? The billionaires have raked it in at historic levels. The wealth of America's 900 billionaires has surged by 120% in the last 10 years. They now own almost $10 trillion. And we now have Elon Musk as the first trillionaire of the world. And that is on top of the nearly 11,000 centimillionaires, meaning people who own at least $100 million. Keep in mind, they're also extremely, extremely wealthy. I mean, these are all people in the stratosphere of wealth, and we are all here down below. And so there is no ambiguity about what's needed or who can pay for it. What is absent is any political party, any political organization, any political representatives who are willing to fight for this. That's what's missing. We need healthcare for all, covering every aspect of health needs, and it needs to be funded by taxing the rich. And a refusal by Democrats to tax the rich, who end up bankrolling their campaigns, is what makes things that are wildly popular and urgently needed so, quote unquote, impossible to pay for. This sleight of hand by Democrats is one of the main things thwarting the progressive causes they claim to support. But what lies behind it is the class allegiance of the Democratic Party itself. I mean, this party was never a party of the working class. It was a party of slavery. It was a party of Jim Crow. This party was always a party of the ruling class. And it's up to us for us to understand that this strategy is not working. And we are at a moment where working class anger against both parties is at a historic high. And at a time when Trump's approval ratings have tanked beyond belief, the congressional Democrats have managed to become even more unpopular than Trump. And yet most labor leaders and other leaders on the left have been and are still engaged in keeping the billionaire-owned Democratic Party on life support. I already mentioned the situation in California, but what's happened since then, since all those defeats? Far from learning the lesson and forging an independent fighting movement to win CalCare, the leadership of most unions, not just the nurses union, most unions today have now scandalously endorsed fossil fuel billionaire, hedge fund billionaire Tom Steyer, actually is a vulture fund billionaire, Tom Steyer for governor and they've done the same with all the local, state legislature Democrats that betrayed CalCare more than 4 times. And so, this is a very important point in terms of strategy of how to win, because unconditional support for the Democratic Party is part and parcel of the problem. In the labor movement, it is part and parcel of what we call business unionism, which dominates the labor leadership today, which is, business unionism means making peace with the capitalist system, which also means then being at peace with the capitalist bosses rather than fighting them, which also in turn means being at peace and really in real alignment with the parties that represent the interests of the bosses. So in other words, the business unionist labor leadership and the NGO leadership, they are in lockstep with the Democratic Party, which represents the ruling class. So that's the stranglehold on movements, that if we don't break this stranglehold, we're not winning anything. I mean, we don't even have a $15 an hour minimum wage nationally. The national minimum wage is $7.25. Winning single-payer healthcare is a much taller, in orders of magnitude harder, because of the defeat it would represent and the money that it would represent that the ruling class would need to part with. So it is not going to happen without breaking that stranglehold. And that the starting point is that we need to reject the dead-end strategy of trying to get the Democratic Party, sort of lobbying the Democrats and so on, and that we have to build independent campaigns to win universal public health care and other concrete demands. And I think we have some lessons to learn from our experience on the Seattle City Council office. I was a lone socialist on the Seattle City Council for 10 years between 2014 and 2023. All the other council members were Democrats. During that decade, my office won countless historic victories for working people. John mentioned the nation's highest minimum wage, the Amazon tax, and renters' rights. We also, in the wake of the Roe v. Wade debacle, in the Dobbs ruling, we also made Seattle sanctuary city, and we increased the Amazon tax funds to fund publicly funded, to have publicly funded free abortion for everybody who needs it. Every single one of these victories was opposed by a large majority of the Democratic city council members, including often by the self-described progressives. Working people won the victories because we used our office, my office. I say our because we build movements to win things. It's not about one person, but the leadership is crucial. That our office providing that leadership and the clarity that I'm not going to go and appease other Democrats and think of them as my colleagues. It's not a normal work environment. They're not my colleagues. As long as they're supporting as long as they represent the interests of the billionaires, they are my class enemies because I'm fighting for the working class. I never lost clarity about that. And that is why we were only able to win these victories despite the opposition by the Democrats, both overt and behind the scenes opposition, because I was not preoccupied with trying to appease them. Instead, we went to war against the establishment by building militant movements and creating mass support for all the things that we ended up winning. And the way we won was the movement was sharp enough to make it clear to the Democrats, especially the progressive Democrats, that if they voted against our bills, it would be political suicide for them because we would extract the price for their betrayal. That is how we won. And so the a fundamental first step to win healthcare is having movement leaders who are clear about the need to break from the Democratic Party stranglehold. And rather than, quote unquote, partnering with the Democratic politicians who have already betrayed us, we need leaders who will build independent mass movements that publicly expose the betrayals and put a steep price tag on the political reputation of the Democratic politicians. And to be clear, none of this prevents any genuine Democrat from supporting us. That was the whole principle that we operated in City Hall as well. And many times we had progressive Democrats join us, but the starting point was never, I'm going to have backroom discussions with them and water down what I'm standing for in order to make them happy. The starting point was always, what are working people ready to fight for? And there we are with them. And if a Democratic politician wanted to join us, they were absolutely welcome to. So that principle remains, but that can't be the starting point because that is when you start having selling out and betrayals. And so what we need is independent movements with mass rallies, strike action, civil disobedience. It will involve launching ballot initiatives, starting perhaps even in just one city. But the reality is that winning our congressional campaign, again, and defeating Adam Smith and winning a congressional position would be an absolute political earthquake in favor of winning single payer. Winning free healthcare for all, funded by taxing the rich, which is how we're formulating it, but basically for winning single payer healthcare. It would absolutely be a game changer. In the same way that winning winning our city council election was the complete game changer that was needed to win $15 an hour. That would not have been won without us winning the election, because the election itself was a referendum on the $15 demand. And John mentioned that the wage is now $21.30 an hour. That was because one of the battles we waged in that fight was for inflation increases. And it was a bitterly fought battle. The Democrats, until the very last moment before the actual vote, fought tooth and nail to eke out every possible corporate loophole, which meant that we had to fight tooth and nail back until the last second. And that's the basis on which we won a very strong bill for $15 an hour. And so we have to recognize that what stands between working people and universal healthcare is obviously the capitalist system and the class that benefits from it. But in a more immediate sense, the Democratic Party, the NGO leaders, and the business unionist leaders who support the Democratic Party unconditionally. We are seeing that the Democratic Party is a graveyard for our movements, whether it's for single payer, for the anti-war movement, or the fight against Trump and the right wing. In fact, Trump has now been elected twice because of the betrayals by the Democratic Party. And we showed on the city council that we can fight. Working people can win if we fight. And right now, there is huge potential with millions of workers absolutely fed up and ready to fight. And it is on us. It's our moral and political responsibility to use this moment to really build something historic. Just a few points I wanted to end on. One is, I think there is some discussion to be had about, can you win healthcare in one city? We need a national movement. And people who say that are absolutely spot on. I mean, we cannot, no system of healthcare of the kind we're talking about can survive in one city or state. We do need national free healthcare funded by taxing the rich. Absolutely. And we need a national movement. And which is why I'm saying that winning our congressional position would be an absolute game changer. There is no doubt about that. And so I really appeal to everybody to fight for this concrete opportunity we have where we can actually win if everybody fights alongside us, an opportunity to win a congressional position. But at the same time, we also have to understand that winning single-payer healthcare will need breakthroughs, concrete breakthroughs. So concretely, winning free healthcare, say in a major U.S. city like Seattle, would be a massive breakthrough that would act as a battering ram in the fight for universal healthcare nationally. It would, it would decisively break the impasse caused by the failure of progressive Democrats to win Medicare for all. And just to say, a powerful example of this is Canada. Canada's public healthcare system, which we know is called Medicare, began as a local victory led by militant socialists and workers independent of the pro-capitalist parties. They won it first in the Saskatchewan province, which at the time had a population of about 900,000, which is not much bigger than Seattle. And that victory emboldened workers in other provinces who fought for and won similar victories, because the system in Saskatchewan became so popular that that ultimately, I mean, the support for it and the clamoring for that system nationally in other provinces was so strong that it actually scared the ruling class parties that this left party, which is called the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, that they would, and which won the healthcare in Medicare in Saskatchewan. The ruling class parties were very afraid that the CCF would win power at the national level, at the federal government level, and that is why they passed Medicare out of fear of that. That's the strategy to win. That it is an actual threat against the ruling class parties. That is, if we don't have that, we're not going to win. It's as simple as that. I mean, so the example of 15 absolutely is an important example of this. I mean, we won it through my Revolutionary Socialist City Council office in Seattle. And then what happened? It spread nationally. Tens of millions of workers nationally have been able to win raises, substantial raises around the country because of what we started in Seattle. And so I think we have to discuss that strategy in different ways. Obviously, a lot of discussion needs to be had. But I think bottom line, and I'll end on this, the bottom line is that we need breakthroughs for the working class, and we have to come out of the stranglehold, break out of the stranglehold of the Democratic Party and all their allies who have prevented any progress on these crucial issues for our times. And I would just end by saying that if we were to win, then in Congress, then it will as far as the ruling class is concerned, it will be a nightmare for them. So I really think that it is, and because they understand what it will actually mean. I have pledged that if we win, then I will turn my congressional inauguration into a mass rally in Washington, D.C. of 10,000 people and immediately launch mass national campaigns to end military aid for all military aid to Israel, and also to win free healthcare for all funded by taxing the rich. I mean, it will be just an incredible, unheard of momentum. And this is right now, it's do or die. It's, the primaries on August 4th. If we don't proceed into the general election, this campaign dies here. So help us keep this campaign alive and get into the general election, because our chances of winning then catapult beyond that if we are able to run against Adam Smith, be the only two candidates in Adam Smith and us. We have an actual shot of winning, but right now is where the rubber hits the road in the next 7 weeks. So I really hope you will all join us. Thank you.
I wanted to unmute myself and applause. The emoji doesn't do it justice, really. Thank you so much, Kshama, for sharing your thoughts and being here and sharing your expertise as well. I wanted to open it up for discussion, questions. People feel free to raise your hand will keep people in order by Zoom and how they organize people raising their hands. But before we get into that, I did want to share also that 100% agree with what Kshama had shared. And, I think one of the impetus for having this discussion tonight is that, even amongst like healthcare organizations, and PNHP is not innocent with this as well. I've been with the organization for over 10 years in various capacities. And now as president of this chapter, I feel like we need to be thinking radically about how we can change our strategy, how we can think about moving these bills forward, but also moving people forward, right? Because bills come with the impetus and with the will of the people, right? And so one criticism, and I'll be honest with PNHP, is that we've shared the same strategy that Democrats have also had as well, where we have to work together, or excuse me, with what progressives had tried to do with the Democratic Party, where we feel like if we align ourselves with the Democrats, if we align ourselves with progressives in Congress, and if we, maneuver some of these bills through committee and write it in such a way that will win Medicare for all without actually including people in our movement and general people. And I think when we talk about people, yes, the working class and labor organizations are a critical component of that. But I would challenge everyone on this call tonight and everyone in the movement in Kshama's office as well to think beyond that and think about people who are not working, people who are disabled, the poor, people who are unhoused currently, youth who may not be able to work, and then the elderly who are retired or may be on disability and may not be able to work as well. So we have to think comprehensively about how we move this organization, how we move these bills, and how we move the people of the United States forward in order to get this passed. Democrats, they have tried and failed time and again, and Kshama alluded to this beautifully. And we can see people like Adam Smith, we can see people like Kamala Harris, where they formally co-sponsor these bills, and we think in PNHP and other healthcare organizations that that's a win, but it's a false support, right? Because as soon as it gains traction, as soon as they consider running for a higher office, like Kamala did with the presidency, then they drop their co-sponsorship, and then we're left in the wind. So there's lots of we can have these allyships, we can think about partnering with Democrats, but our focus and our time and our energy really needs to be with the people and other organizations. And I'm hoping that PNHP Washington can update our, MO, which I think we have been attempting to do more recently, and also bring in other people, bring in the youth, and bring in fresh blood is what we like to say sometimes, and get these things passed. And I just wanted to share those thoughts as well. And then lastly, one other thing that I think PNHP and other healthcare organizations can think about, and I think there's a few that have done this beautifully, is that we feel that our expertise as physicians and our prestige, which certainly comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of respect, which can move things forward. But there's so much other players, there's so many other critical individuals in the healthcare domain. Nurses, we think about what National Nurses United has done in their years of organizing. They have won victory after victory, and they've been the true champions, I would argue, of some of these wins with Medicare for all legislation, both in the House and Senate. And then we can also think about labor in terms of just house staff. We can think about labor, including custodians, technicians, even volunteers, whatever your credence is in working in the hospital. All of these people need to be at the forefront in speaking to their experience and speaking to their passion and moving these things forward. So I wanted to share those thoughts briefly. I want to open it up for discussion. And if there's no discussion, Kshama, thank you so much for joining. Do we have any questions, comments, anything else people would like to share? Natalie, of course, would love to hear from you.
Hey, so okay. Hey, I'm actually here with my partner Don Vincent, and my partner is actually a constituent of Kshama Sawant's, or what I guess we hope will be Kshama Sawant's district. So if you want to say something, Becky, you certainly can.
Oh, hello, Kshama. It was very nice to hear you speak today, and I'm very grateful that PNHP and Natalie was here to put on the event. And yeah, definitely. I literally learned today while sitting and listening to you that my representative is Adam Smith, and you have definitely won my vote for sure. I will definitely like basically as soon as you started talking, I was like, I like this person. I'm gonna vote. And um I will also be trying to convince some other folks in my area to vote for you down here in Renton because I don't think a lot of people, at least for me, I'm a California expat and I only just recently moved to Washington, the King County area. So I'm still learning the local politics and still learning kind of the landscape. And this is a really great opportunity and um, event to learn about what I mean, I guess the history of healthcare and how the Democrats have co-opted. I've always known that, and it's always been something that I think a lot of people have known that the rich and powerful co-opt the movements of the working class and use movements of the working class in order to maintain power and stay in power. And you're absolutely right. As soon as that first domino falls, I think that everything will hopefully, well, things will line up in place. Thank you so much for speaking, and you definitely have my vote. So.
And also, I just want to say, we're tired of begging for scraps, and we shouldn't have to, right? Like, I just wanted to say thank you, Kshama, for just addressing the elephant in the room, which is to say that, I guess that's kind of a pun, which is to address that, like, this should have happened already. This is something that's basically everywhere else in every other developed country. We have the resources, we have the workforce, we have the political will. The only thing stopping us is this systematic effort preventing us from getting what we have needed and deserved for such a long time. So thank you for addressing it because it feels so incredibly obvious, and yet somehow we're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah. And then also one more thing, as soon as you talked about California and like how things were blocked, I was like, oh my God, it's Gavin Newsom. I hate Gavin Newsom. I do not like him, but I'm in Washington now, so thank you.
Thanks.
David, you have your hand raised.
Yeah. I think that we have made some progress over the last 20 years, and PNHP has been an played an important role in that. The progress being that, way back then, maybe 10, 15% of people were thinking that Medicare for all is a good idea, despite all the negativity coming from the other side. But now if you look at the statistics, it seems like at least 60% of the population would like a government program that everybody's in, nobody out. So the problem is we've got to convince our politicians that those voters are out there and that they need to do something if they want to stay in office to carry through with that particular right, as well as a lot of other things that they need to do. But I think politicians can run on that now.
In any case, I have updating on some stuff. I'm also associated with Whole Washington, and the latest news from them is that they think within 2028 that we will be able to pass by ballot their statewide version of improved Medicare for all, and also, and in Kshama's campaign, she's looking to work beyond the results of the election and to make it certain that we would have a similar kind of a result coming out of 2028 for a citywide healthcare paid for by $4 billion, probably extracted by use of the multimillionaire tax, which we hope still holds together after the initiative going after it. But I'd like Kshama maybe to respond to whether we're going to have a pairing of those issues and what would be a difficulty with adopting Whole Washington's approach as opposed to one which I believe you have, which would maybe bump out private insurance, allowing for the multimillionaires to contribute to a truly universal healthcare that doesn't have to put up with billionaire scapegoats and such. But anyway, thanks for talking, Kshama, too. A very nice discussion.
Yeah, that's correct. First of all, I want to say thank you so much, Kshama, for joining us at PNHP and Snap Washington. And it's always great to see you. And secondly, I just wanted to say something that I was thinking of as when we first started this meeting. We talked about like the elections in itself, and this is my personal opinion. And before every election cycle, whether it's presidential, whether it's Congress, regardless, we always have the concept of the lesser evil, and we have like the red versus blue, like classical argument that comes every single time that we have to choose the lesser evil. And when I look at the candidates, Adam Smith, for me, as a Palestinian, he just recently introduced the United States-Israel Defense Tech Co-op Initiative, and as part of the like 2027 National Defense Authorization Act, which enables the genocidal state to continue its mass surveillance and crimes against Palestinian people. And so for me, Adam Smith, with his long history of warmongering and receiving ABAC money and other back money, he is not a lesser evil. He's pretty evil to me. And what I think is for us to see that politicians are more aligned with the people desires. Yes, we have 60% of the population wanting universal healthcare, but a lot of the politicians are not very well representative of what the people want. And for that, I think to see that change, we need to force that change. We need to push for that change. And this is why I feel like we need more voices that are willing to scratch beneath surface level the system to see that change. And because of that, I'm wishing Kshama best of luck in her campaign, personally. And yeah, it was great. It was great to hear you today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that without a doubt, support for universal health care, whether we call it Medicare for all or single payer, or as we're calling it, free health care for all by taxing the rich, that there is huge support for it right now. And we can see that all across the district where we're campaigning. I'll share our flyer that we're using, or not flyer, but our brochure for our campaign in a moment in the chat. But it's the top issue on our brochure, free healthcare for all, tax the rich. And we run into very few people who don't support that, actually. There is, I mean, it's coming both from the successes of the single payer movement over the past couple of decades. And it's also coming from just the objective anger at the existing system, how rotten it is, and how, these health insurance corporations are getting rich off of denying people care. But of course, the challenge from having that support to actually winning it is still huge, because, ultimately we're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars here in profits. If we were to succeed in getting rid of private insurance and winning any form of universal public health care. The private insurance industry is a 71 billion a year. It's 71 billion a year in profits, even from just the 7 top insurers. If you look at the pharmaceutical industry, it's even higher. It's about 680 billion in profits annually, and that's partly because of the gigantic profit margins that they get away with, of 15 to 20% profit margins. And so we're talking about enormous sums of money. And that is why, both parties and, virtually every politician in both parties are not willing to go up against the pharmaceutical industry or against the private insurance corporations. And, it's one thing for them to put forward this bill, which does reflect the support for single payer that they're putting forward this bill. But it's quite another thing for them to build a movement to fight for it. And that movement to fight for it is the decisive question, as Kshama was talking about. And I think that's the big difference that we have had with those the progressive Democrats who it's good that they say that we need Medicare for all, but it's not going to go anywhere until that movement is there. And it does require building independent of the Democratic Party, because all these efforts, whether it's for single payer healthcare, or it's for a livable wage, all of these at the end of the day run up against the wall of just the concrete reality that that the parties are linked by 1,000 threads, both the Democrats and Republicans, to the billionaires. And if they themselves get out of line, as you know, and take the route that Kshama did, then they become enemy number one of the rest of their party, and that's what AOC and Pramila Jayapal are not prepared to do. And so we do need people like Kshama who are prepared to do that. And I think even having one Kshama Sawant in Congress would be a sea change in the situation, just like it was in Seattle. In Seattle, when Kshama was elected, it was a political earthquake that just had ongoing ramifications for 10 years. And it's no accident those Democrats are not happy with Kshama and the fact that she built movements to put pressure on them. But that's how change happens. It wasn't Martin Luther King morally convincing LBJ that overturned Jim Crow. It was the mass movements that overturned Jim Crow, and with MLK playing a key leading role in those mass movements. And because that pressure creates a different dynamic. As Kshama said, it creates a massive political cost for the political establishment when we do that. And so that's what's needed. And I think this campaign is a big opportunity to do that, to create real pressure around this issue. But in order for us to win, I think it's telling that I didn't catch her name, but spoke earlier about how she didn't realize that she was, that Kshama was running and had an opportunity to vote for her as an alternative to Adam Smith. That, we've talked to tens of thousands of people in the district, but it's going to require talking to many tens of thousands more. And so anybody here who wants to be part of this campaign, I'll share it again in the chat, but we have volunteer activity almost every day. And we have a volunteer day coming up on Saturday. And everybody should absolutely get involved if you can. I know PNHP can't endorse, but of course, members of the organization can get active. And the last thing I'd say towards that end, also, if you can donate to our campaign, that would be huge as well. Obviously not as an organization, but as individuals, because we are up against millions of dollars backing Adam Smith. And we've actually got 7 times more donors than Adam Smith, just showing the wide support for our campaign. But our median donation is $25 and Adam Smith's median donation is $1,000. So we need that support from working people.
Yeah, thanks so much, Calvin. And yes, of course, anybody who's here on this call or any members of PNHP Washington SNAP, feel free to volunteer. There's no problem with us as individuals, obviously volunteering. It gets a little bit trickier when we as a formal organization, because sponsors people, fundraisers, etc. So unless there's no other comments, Kshama, Calvin, everybody else, thank you so much for joining tonight. This has been a really riveting discussion and a much needed discussion as well, just given what progress we've made, but how much further we have to go to actually pass Medicare for all and get a single payer system here in the United States. You've shared some great insights, and I hope that we have our board meeting coming up this next Sunday, and I think that we can bring this into our discussions there and thinking about how we can mobilize people, get more people on the ground, and start these conversations with thousands, tens of thousands, if not millions of people across the country to get this. To get people like Kshama elected, but also to get single payer passed and other things. So again, thank you so much, Kshama. Unless there's anything else, we'll go ahead and close this for the night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.